Okay, so from today we will start hematology, and as you all know that as per the new MCI UG curriculum, you have these specific learning objectives which you must be aware of. So the first objective is describe hematopoiesis and extramedullary hematopoiesis. The second is you should be able to describe the role of anticoagulants in hematology. You should be able to define and classify anemia, enumerate and describe the investigations of anemia, and the last objective is mainly for the practical classes, and you should be able to perform, identify, and describe the peripheral blood picture in cases of anemia. So, what is hematology? Hematology is study of the blood and its components. And what is blood? Blood is the main circulating fluid in the human body. And in adults, we have around 5 liters of blood. And the composition of blood is there are two components. First is cellular, and another is a non-cellular component. The blood has various functions. We all are aware that we have this blood which carries oxygen and various gases, and it is also responsible for delivery of the nutrients like vitamins and various nutrients which are present in the food we take, and it is also responsible for removal of the waste products like carbon dioxide, nitrogenous waste, and cellular toxins. And blood has various cells which provide us protection against the invading microorganisms. So what is the composition of blood? In the cellular composition, we have these blood corpuscles or blood cells, and these cells are red cells, WBCs, and platelets. And among the WBCs, we have they can be of granulocytic cells or agranulocytic cells. Granulocytic means in the cytoplasm they have the granules, while in agranulocytes the cytoplasm it lacks granules. And among the granulocytes we have neutrophils, eosinophil, basophils, and in the agranulocytes we have monocytes and lymphocytes. So in the blood the cellular composition is made up of these cells, while the non-cellular composition is known as plasma. Plasma contains various proteins but no cells can be identified in that. So here you can see that this is the blood vessel which is made up of tunica intima, media, and adventitia, and inside the lumen of the blood vessels we have blood, and the blood is made up of these RBCs, WBCs, platelets, and rest of the fluid is plasma. So what are those white blood cells? In the white blood cells we have neutrophils. We all know that neutrophils have the function of phagocytosis, and they are the first ones to respond to bacteria or a virus. And eosinophils, they are known for their role in the allergic symptoms. And the basophils, we all know that they have these coarse granules. So when we look at basophils in the peripheral smear, we can see that the granules are very large and they obscure the nucleus. And we have these lymphocytes. These lymphocytes with very scant amount of cytoplasms, and we all know that lymphocytes can be B lymphocytes or T lymphocytes. B lymphocytes produce antibodies, and T lymphocytes they give us cell-mediated immunity via CD4 or CD type of T lymphocytes. And the bigger one, this cell is a monocyte, and its main function is phagocytosis. So in the blood, apart from the cells, we have this plasma. So what happens when we order investigation for any of the patient, and we want to know we just do not want the blood to coagulate. So we add some anticoagulant, and this anticoagulant will prevent the RBCs platelets to coagulate. So whatever is left, if you will leave this anticoagulated blood for some time, so RBCs will come to the bottom, and this rest of the fluid will come on the top, and in the middle there is these WBCs and platelets will come up. So this straw color, light yellow color fluid, which is acellular, it is known as plasma. So what is serum then? Serum is when we collect the sample in the red cap vial, in which there is no additive, no anticoagulant. So if we will leave it for some time, the blood will coagulate, and whatever is left is known as serum. So during the process of blood coagulation, all the clotting factors which are normally present in the plasma, they will be used up, and they will initiate the coagulation cascade, and the blood clot will form. So whatever is left now is known as serum. So serum is plasma minus fibrinogen, or plasma minus clotting factors is known as serum. So suppose we want to know about the renal function test, in which we want to know the level of this blood urea, serum creatinine, or in liver function test we want to know the levels of bilirubin, or in SGOT, SGPT, alkaline phosphatase. So all those investigations are carried on serum. But in hematology, we take the sample, majority of the samples, depending on what investigation we want to perform. Suppose we want to do the complete blood count. Because we want the blood count, we will run the sample in the automated analyzer, where each and every cell will pass through a small aperture. So we just do not want it to clot. So that is here that is because of this we collect the sample in the EDTA vial, that is purple cap vial. I will tell you about anticoagulants after this. So you should be able to tell what is the difference between the plasma and the serum. Okay, so our first learning objective is that you should know what is hematopoiesis and what is extramedullary hematopoiesis. So hematopoiesis, poiesis is synthesis, and hemato is these blood cells. So synthesis of blood cells is known as hematopoiesis, and this production, it occurs in adults. It occurs in the axial skeleton, in the vertebral body, in the sternum, in the pelvis. But in the fetal time, during this phase of life, the hematopoiesis, it occurs in yolk sac, and from second trimester onwards it starts in a liver and spleen, and from third trimester onwards it starts occurring in the peripheral skeleton. So normally it occurs in the bone marrow. So we know that you just imagine that there is this pelvis, and there is cortex, and there is medulla, and inside the medulla of that bone we have this red granular spongy material which is known as bone marrow. So this is where all the blood cells are synthesized. So what is extramedullary hematopoiesis? Extramedullary hematopoiesis, see, during the fetal time, the bone hematopoiesis was occurring in liver and spleen also. So what happens if it requires in adulthood, like if there is severe demand, for example in thalassemia patients there is severe hemolysis. So to compensate this, the liver and spleen, they will come up, and on those sites the hematopoiesis will start. That is known as extramedullary hematopoiesis. So this extramedullary hematopoiesis will lead to organomegaly. So there will be hepatomegaly, splenomegaly. So that is the cause of hepatosplenomegaly in cases of thalassemia. So what are the cellular pathways of hematopoiesis? This we should know that in the bone marrow we have these stem cells, and the stem cells again can be totipotential stem cells or multipotential. Then they differentiate into progenitor cells, precursor cells, and ultimately what we see in the blood are effector cells. So here in the diagram, these are the pluripotent stem cells. These pluripotent stem cells, they have unlimited self-renewal capacity. They can divide into any kind of these cells, mature cells. So, but they are present in a very small amount in our bone marrow. They have the ability to differentiate. So these pluripotent stem cells, they will divide, they will differentiate into multipotential stem cells, then into colony forming, blast forming units, and then ultimately they will mature into these cells. So more simplified version is from the pluripotent stem cell, we differentiates into multipotent stem cells, and you have to remember that this multipotent stem cell will further differentiate either into myeloid progenitor or lymphoid progenitor. So at this step, this myeloid progenitor, they will be able to differentiate into only myeloid cells, and the lymphoid progenitors can give rise to only lymphoid cells like B lymphocyte, T lymphocyte or natural killer cells, while the myeloid progenitors, they can differentiate into these myeloblast agar banta hai, to from the myeloblast there will be formation of, they will further mature into or differentiate into monocyte or neutrophil, basophil or eosinophil. If this myeloid progenitor, it differentiates towards erythroblast, so there will be formation of red blood cells from the reticulocytes, and if it differentiates into megakaryoblast, so there will be synthesis of platelets. For hematopoiesis, there are many growth factors which play a very important role, and among those, erythropoietin is very important. And as we all are aware that erythropoietin is synthesized in kidney. You must be remembering that in the kidney we have the glomerulus, and in the glomerulus there is afferent arteriole and efferent arteriole. So afferent arteriole, the function is to carry the oxygenated blood, and after filtration whatever is left, it moves out of the kidney via efferent arteriole. So when this afferent arteriole, in the kidney there is juxtaglomerular apparatus. This juxtaglomerular apparatus, it has the capacity to sense the oxygen level in the, which is present in the blood. So whenever there is anemia, and because whenever there will be anemia, the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood will reduce. So these kidneys will sense that oxygen level is going down, so they will start producing erythropoietin. Now this erythropoietin will further go into the, via blood, it will go into the bone marrow, and it will stimulate the erythroid differentiation and proliferation, and its absence will result in apoptosis of erythroid committed cell. So if a patient is having a if the patient is having renal failure, so if there is renal failure, there can be secondary lack of erythropoietin, which can be the secondary cause of anemia in such patients. So here, these pluripotent stem cells are forming blast forming units, that is erythroids, and here this erythropoietin will start. It will act on BF, lead to formation of colony forming units, will further stimulate the and increase the red cell production. So we will go fast now. Pluripotent stem cells, they are known as the godfather cells, and it's self-renew to any cellular element, but they're present in very small numbers, and they're highly resistant to chemotherapy, and they have they are CD30 positive. These are the totipotential stem cells. If there is problem in these stem cells, the patient will have aplastic anemia or can have certain types of leukemia. So in cases of aplastic anemia, because these stem cells are not there, so there will be complete absence of, or there will be severe pancytopenia, because these stem cells are not able to differentiate. And one more thing about aplastic anemia, because these totipotential stem cells are not there, so there will be no extramedullary hematopoiesis, because these stem cells are the ones which go to liver and spleen, and they are responsible for hepatosplenomegaly by extramedullary hematopoiesis. So by norms, if hepatosplenomegaly is present, so aplastic anemia itself is excluded. So from pluripotent, we have multipotential stem cells. They either go into lymphoid channel or into the myeloid stem cell channel, and they are capable of extended differentiation. So lymphoid stem cells, they can give rise to, if there is some problem in the lymphoid stem cells, there will be lymphoproliferative malignancies such as acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and there are more. And if there is any disturbance in the myeloid stem cell, it can give rise to various myeloproliferative malignancies. Or those multipotential stem cells, they further divide into colony forming units, and they have limited self renewal, they have limited differentiation, and we have various CFU. So CFUG is this kind of CFUG will lead to formation of, will differentiate towards granulocyte only. If there is CFUGM, they will differentiate towards granulocyte and monocytes. CFU-ME will form megakaryocyte and erythrocytes, while this granulocyte, erythrocyte mixed macrophage and megakaryocyte colonies, they will lead to formation of these 4 types of cells. And these are the colonies, or these are the progenitor cells which are responsive to hematopoietic growth factors. Like erythropoietin will stimulate the CFUE, and if in some cases you must have heard that the patient is given GM-CSF, it will stimulate the formation of these granulocytes and monocytes. Further, as they divide into precursor cells, blast and progeny. See, these are the cells which we are able to see in the bone marrow. When we take out the bone marrow sample of a patient from the posterior superior iliac spine, we make the smear of those bone marrows, we are able to see these cells. These are the first morphologically identifiable cells. Like erythroblast we can identify myeloblast, lymphoblast, and megakaryoblast, and they do not have any capacity of self-renewal, and if present, it is very minimal. The last one is mature effector cells, which we see in the peripheral blood. In the peripheral blood, we see red cells, neutrophils, monocytes, lymphocytes, and platelets. We know their functions. So this is from the bone marrow of a patient. Here you can see these 2 large cells with very blue cytoplasm. So we can recognize these cells as erythroblast, pro-erythroblast, or very early normoblast. And you can see these 2 nucleoli here, these 2 nucleoli here. So these are the pro-erythroblasts. So we know that these cells will give rise to RBCs. Here you can see that this is a cell with a small amount of granules and very pale cytoplasm, and this is a metamyelocyte. So this will give rise to neutrophils. Here you can see that from the early normoblast, there will be formation of intermediate normoblast. Here you can see in the background we have RBCs, and these are the intermediate normoblasts. Here you can see that the nucleus, it has reduced in size, and cytoplasm is not that inky blue in color. It is, a bit pink color has started coming up, because at this hemoglobin has started, these cells have started the synthesis of hemoglobin. So these are known as polychromatophils or intermediate normoblast. At this stage, the cytoplasm will start looking blue. Oh, sorry, pink, because of the hemoglobinization. Here in the background, you can see that this is the myelocytes, and these cells will give rise to neutrophils. So here this is the late normoblast. Further, those intermediate normoblasts, here you can see that this nucleus size has further reduced, and it is pycnotic, and ultimately it will come out of the cell. And here you can compare the color of the RBC. Adjacent RBCs is similar because these have hemoglobinized. So this is how our RBCs are synthesized. So ultimately this nucleus will come out, and we will have these anucleated RBCs. So those RBCs which are synthesized in the bone marrow, they are basically reticulocyte. Reticulocyte because they still have this RNA material which is already present there. So when these reticulocytes, they will be released from the bone marrow into the circulation. They will go multiple times via spleen, and during that process their RNA material will be taken up by the spleen, and we these RBCs only which have very good oxygen carrying capacity. So this is how RBCs are formed. Should be able to you should know the role of anticoagulants in hematology. So what is the definition of anticoagulant? Anticoagulant, anything, any material which inhibits coagulation. So it is an agent that is used to prevent the formation of blood clots, and some of them occur naturally in blood eating animals such as leeches and mosquitoes. And various characteristics of anticoagulants. It should not alter the size of the cell. It should not cause hemolysis. It should minimize platelet aggregation, and there should not be. It should not affect the staining, or it should be soluble in water and blood, and it should be able to keep the blood in fluid condition. So I will tell you only those anticoagulants which are very important for you guys, and you should be able to use, because during examination in the table viva or in the grand viva, there is a tray in which we keep these vials. So you will be asked about these vials and their uses and the additive which has been there. So first is red color, red cap tube. In the red cap tube, there is no anticoagulant, and they are mainly used for the collection of serum. And if you will leave the blood sample for 10 to 15 minutes and you will allow it to clot, then you will get the serum. The second most important one is the lavender or purple top tube, purple cap tube, which contains EDTA. This EDTA is a calcium chelator, and it is for the collection of whole blood. Then the third one is the grey cap tube, for determination of glucose estimation, and in this we have sodium fluoride which will inhibit the enolase, and this they also have this potassium oxalate as anticoagulant. Then the fourth one is this light blue cap tube which contains sodium citrate. So it is mainly for the coagulation study. So if during when you are sitting in your clinics and you come across a child who is having you want to rule out any coagulation disorder or bleeding disorder of the patient is might be going for surgery, and you think that before surgery you want to know what is the PT level, prothrombin time level, so that the patient might not keep on bleeding inside. So in those scenarios, the blood sample will be collected in the light blue cap tubes or vials which contain trisodium citrate. So anticoagulants can be classified as calcium chelators or non-calcium chelators. Calcium chelators can be EDTA, trisodium citrate, or they can be oxalates. Well, in non-calcium chelators, we have heparin and warfarin. So in the calcium chelators, we have ammonium oxalate, potassium oxalate, double oxalate, and EDTA. And among the citrates, we have sodium citrate and acid citrate dextrose, which are used as anticoagulant in blood bank. And among the non-calcium chelators, we have sodium heparin and warfarin. So the commonly used anticoagulants are EDTA, which we use in our laboratories as a dipotassium EDTA, because this kind of EDTA is better over trisodium EDTA and tripotassium EDTA, and this is better and it is present in the powder form or in the liquid form inside these purple top tubes, and it will keep the blood in the fluid state. It will not allow the blood to clot. The oxalates can also be used, and you have seen that the oxalate is used in gray tube, gray cap tube for blood glucose estimation. Sodium heparin can be used. It is rarely used, and it is mainly used if you want to go for osmotic fragility or you want to make the LE cell preparation in the cases of SLE. In those cases only heparin is used, otherwise it is not. And trisodium citrate is mainly for the coagulation studies and also for the ESR if you want to. And sodium fluoride and potassium oxalate we already have discussed for blood sugar estimation. The next objective is define and classify anemia. So anemia is defined as a reduction of the total circulating red cell mass below normal limit. So anemia is reduction of the total circulating red cell mass, and anemia reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, so it leads to tissue hypoxia. So how we will assess this red cell mass? Practically the measurement of red cell mass is not easy, so we take these two parameters like hematocrit and hemoglobin concentration as a they will predict the anemia. So anemia is usually diagnosed based on the reduction in the hematocrit. So what is hematocrit? It is the ratio of packed red cells to total blood volume, and the hemoglobin concentration, if they are low, then we call it anemia. So classification of anemia is very important. Anemia can be classified into on the basis of the morphology of these red blood cells, on the basis of etiology of anemia, or functional classification is also there, and the classification based on the reticulocyte response. So on the basis of cause or etiology, anemia can be because of there can be sudden loss of blood. There can be acute blood loss or chronic blood loss which leads to anemia, or there can be, if it is not synthesized normally, the production rate has decreased, that will also lead to anemia, or on the basis of etiology, if there is excessive destruction of blood cells, that will also lead to anemia. On the basis of morphology of red blood cells, it can be normocytic, that is normal, it is equal to the normal RBC size. It can be microcytic, that is smaller in size, and macro is bigger in size if RBC size is bigger than the normal RBCs. So this etiological classification, the mechanism can be blood loss, acute blood loss either because of trauma, or chronic blood loss can be because of various causes, like there can be gynecologic disturbances, like the patient might have menorrhagia for 2 months, 3 months, that can lead to chronic blood loss, and there can be GI lesions also. The second etiology is increased red cell destruction, that we also known as hemolysis. So there is a long list, but this is very simple list. So hemolysis, either it can be because of some problems in the red cell membrane. If there is problem in the red cell membrane and the shape, which leads to change in the shape of the RBCs. We all know that RBCs are biconcave, and because of this biconcave shape, they are able to move easily through the spleen. And spleen is known as graveyard because the sinusoids they have these Kupffer cells, and they're very small channels through which RBCs are supposed to pass. And these RBCs, they are very easily moldable. They can mold themselves, and they easily pass through these small channels or sinusoids of spleen. But in cases of hereditary spherocytosis, so what will happen in spherocytosis? They have this anchor protein, this skeletal proteins of RBCs which give the shape of biconcave. If those skeletal or those proteins are not there, so they will be, the shape of the RBC will become spheroidal, and the spheroidal RBC, they are not easily moldable. They will not be able to pass through those very narrow channels or sinusoids of spleen, so they will destruct inside the spleen, that is extravascular hemolysis. Or the Kupffer cells, when they will be passing through those channels, those Kupffer cells, they from those spherocytes, leading to very small those are known as microspherocytes. Another is hereditary elliptocytosis. That is again problem in the shape is there, so they will destruct themselves. And there can be some enzyme deficiency like G6PD deficiency or pyruvate kinase deficiency. So these deficiencies will lead to formation of some, some material will be formed, the self hemoglobin will be formed, which will stick to the RBC membrane. And this kind of RBCs, when they will go through the spleen, they are easily destructible by the spleen. Then we can have hemoglobin abnormalities like thalassemia. In the thalassemia, we all are aware that we have adults, we have alpha and beta chains. So if there is beta thalassemia, beta chains are not being synthesized, so alpha chains will start accumulating. And whenever something starts accumulating inside the red cells, those alpha chain precipitates will again, by similar thing, in the spleen they will be destructed, or in the bone marrow they will destruct. Sickle cell, same mechanism, because of some mutations in the beta chain, the shape of the RBCs will change from the normal biconcave shape to the sickle shape, and again they will destruct in the spleen, and similarly simultaneously they will accumulate inside the capillaries also. So whenever they will accumulate inside the capillaries, blood will not go to the respective organs. So there will be the cyanosis will be there. The patient will have leg and chest syndrome, or that is because of the severe pain, because the blood is not flowing to those sites. And PNH, acquired genetic defect. PNH के बारे में I just want to tell you a few things which you should know, that PNH is one condition in which, see, RBCs, they have some anchor proteins which are very much protective to RBCs or WBCs and platelets. So those anchor proteins should always be there, like CD55, CD59. They are GPI linked proteins. So when there is PNH is a condition in which those GPI linked proteins are not there, so the complement proteins which are normally present in our plasma, normally they cannot destruct our cells, but as soon as CD55, 59 are not there, they will be destructed by these this complement pathway, and there will be hemolysis. Another is antibody mediated destruction like hemolytic disease of newborn. You must have heard about this condition, that if the mother is RH positive, RS negative, and the child she's carrying in her womb is RH positive, so the first child will not have any effects. And during the delivery, if there is these RH positive cells of the fetus, they go into the maternal circulation, they create antibody formation, and the first delivery is fine. But when she conceives again, and if again the child, the fetus is RH positive, so those antibodies which were synthesized in during the first pregnancy, they will go and kill the RH positive cells of the fetus, and ultimately, because of the severe hemolysis, and there will be heart failure, and ultimately there will be hydrops fetalis. Transfusion reaction, similarly, if you will transfuse the patient's blood is B positive and you transfuse the A positive blood, we all are aware that if we have corresponding antibodies are there, not the similar antibodies, we have corresponding antibodies, so you have to be very cautious while giving blood. So those in the transfusion reactions will have severe hemolysis. And there are various like mechanical trauma, this hemolytic uremic DIC. These conditions are basically in which there is formation of these small clots are there. As we know in the COVID times, what is happening is there is formation of these, the coagulation capacity has increased. So inside the capillaries there will be small clots will start forming. So whenever the RBCs, they will go through these, they will pass through these capillary channels, they will be destructed. So they will fragment, their shape will change, and those are known as fragmentation syndromes. And infections of the RBCs like malaria, we all know that malaria, when we have this mosquito bite, it will release all this malaria parasite. The plasmodium will be circulated inside the blood, and it will go to the liver, and it will there be in the liver for in the form of merozoites, and those merozoites will then go to the go and infect blood cells, and in the RBCs they will grow up into schizons, and ultimately those RBCs will rupture. So that is the pathogenesis of anemia in malaria, and there are various other mechanisms also. Similarly, hemolysis can occur because of sepsis and snake venom, and there are other severe other diseases. In the etiological classification, decreased red cell production, which you have to remember is aplastic anemia, and in the inherited genetic defect, we have this defect leading to stem cell depletion. We are aware that we have these totipotential stem cells. These stem cells, when they have defects, so there will be aplastic anemia, which can be because of Fanconi or telomerase. There are various others, but red cell production can decrease if we have nutritional deficiencies like vitamin B12 and folate deficiencies are there. So our RBCs will not be able to mature enough. So in vitamin B12 folate deficiency, we will learn in tomorrow about in macrocytic anemia lecture, and see if it is there, so there is proper hemoglobin is not there, so there will be decreased red cell production. If there is deficiency of erythropoietin, now we know if the patient is having renal failure or anemia of chronic disease in which interleukin 6 will increase, and that will further lead to reduced erythropoietin, and that is responsible of decreased red cell production. And there can be some immune mediated injury of progenitors like in aplastic anemia. So these aplastic anemia cases, they are given intravenous immunoglobulins because there is some immune mediated injury which is going on, which acts on the progenitors. And there are other causes also. Decreased red cell production can be because if someone is having some leukemia is excessive WBC production. So bone marrow has limited space. It has space for RBCs, it has space for myeloid cells, but if someone proliferates excessively, if one kind of cell proliferates excessively, so other cells will not get the space to proliferate. Like so, these neoplasms, they can further lead to decreased red cell production, or if there is any metastatic neoplasm or tuberculosis is there, some granulomatous disease is there, they will decrease red cell production. So that was extensive etiological classification, but I think that is very important to know. And when you will be working in your clinics, then obviously you will correlate with all these conditions only. So before moving on to morphological classification, we should know what is mean corpuscular volume, because it is morphological classification is based on MCV. So this is corpuscular is cell. So this is the volume of the blood, average volume of the cell, volume of the RBCs, and it is achieved by dividing the total volume of red cells by the number of RBCs. And it is basically indicator of the average size of the RBCs, and the normal range is 83 to 101 femtoliters. This is morphological classification. See, these classifications are very important. Etiological classification and morphological classification is asked in the vivas also and in the theory also. So morphological classification of anemias is microcytic anemia, because whenever there is MCV is less than 80 femtoliters, macrocytic when the MCV is more than 100 femtoliters, and normocytic. So in microcytic anemia, you have to remember these three conditions, mainly iron deficiency anemia, thalassemias, and sideroblastic anemia. Anemia of chronic disease usually leads to normocytic normochromic anemia, but it can lead to microcytic anemia, but better it is if you tell to the examiner that normocytic normochromic anemia usually occur in the anemia of chronic diseases. So the macrocytic anemia again can be megaloblastic, that is because of vitamin B12 and folate deficiency, but there can be non-megaloblastic anemia also, like in liver disease. In the liver disease, those RBCs, the membrane of the RBCs will get accumulated by some kind of lipoproteins, so that will increase the size of the cells. So they will be taken up as if they are large cells. Hemolytic anemia. Why the MCV is more in hemolytic anemia? Because in hemolysis, our bone marrow responds whenever there is hemolysis. So this erythropoietin will be released, and it will send the signal to the bone marrow that you have to work more for synthesis of more RBCs. So in that process, more reticulocytes will be produced, and they will be immaturely released into the blood. So when you will take the sample of the blood and you will run into the automated analyzer, those reticulocytes will also pass through the aperture, and they will displace more fluid. They will displace more fluid, so the peak which will be generated will be higher up. That will indicate the volume of the RBCs. So those basically those RBCs, those reticulocytes are responsible for high MCV in hemolytic anemias. And there can be other causes like alcoholism, hypothyroidism, and MDS also. So the normocytic normochromic anemias can, again, you have to look for reticulocyte count. If the reticulocyte production is normal, suppose someone has recent blood loss and they have hemolytic anemia, but and reticulocyte count is normal, they can lead to normocytic normochromic type of anemia. And if you are seeing that the morphologically normocytic normochromic cells are there, but reticulocyte count is also very low, then you have to think of what is wrong, because reticulocytes, they tell you about the capacity or efficacy of the bone marrow to produce cells. So if there is reticulocyte count is low with normocytic normochromic morphology, it means some problem is there in the bone marrow. It can be because of aplastic anemia. It can be myelodysplastic anemia. It can be because of secondary just chronic renal failure is there leading to decreased EPO. That can be because of anemia of chronic disease or hypothyroidism. Next is functional classification. Again the same thing. Hypoproliferative, either because of decreased erythropoietin, lack of iron, or marrow damage. Ineffective erythropoiesis. In macrocytic anemia, whatever cells are there which are formed, they have this big nucleus. Normally we have seen that this nucleus normally it starts reducing in size, but in macrocytic anemia, nuclear maturation does not occur. So nucleus is still large, it does not reduce in size. So this kind of cells, they will die itself in the marrow. And another is hemolytic, when there is reticuloendothelial phagocytosis or fragmentation is there, and there are various causes of intravascular hemolysis as well. So this is the third classification. They can be hypoproliferative. Then there is problem in the proliferation. There is progenitors are not able to synthesize the blood cells like in aplastic anemia. Ineffective. For example, in this macrocytic anemia or vitamin B12 folate deficiency, there will be problem with the maturation. The nucleus is not maturing with time. It is not getting pycnosed. It is not becoming pycnotic with time. So there is defect in the maturation. And hemolytic is survival. Survival because whenever they pass through the graveyard, that is the spleen, they will not be able to survive and they will die there. So this is the clinical presentation of anemia. Clinical presentation of anemia, it depends on what is the underlying cause. So if there is iron deficiency anemia, the patient will have, the patient will present to you with complaints of easy fatigue, dizziness, fainting, complaints of faint. The patient will complain of fainting, and there will be low blood pressure, and because the heart has to work more, because there is low volume of blood is there, and there is low hemoglobin, so the heart has to work more, so that is responsible for tachycardia and palpitations, and that can lead to chest pain, angina, and maybe to heart attack. And splenic enlargement or liver enlargement is because of extramedullary hematopoiesis, we have already discussed. Yellowing of the eyes, it occurs in cases of hemolytic anemias, because there is increased destruction of the RBCs that will lead to formation of bilirubin. And in the respiratory system, the patient will have this shortness of breath. So we move on to our next objective, that is baseline investigations. So there is a long list of investigation, but what you do is you will not go for all these investigations in one go. You will advise some baseline investigations depending on the clinical presentation and your general physical examination, your systemic examination, and and you feel that there is anemia, like pallor is there, and hepatosplenomegaly is also there, and the patient is a child, and you have thalassemia. So in that case, you will advise CBC, this complete blood count, which includes this all the red cell parameters and WBCs and everything, reticulocyte count. Then you will advise peripheral blood smear, ESR. So these investigations you will advise in the first step, as a first step, and on the basis of that report, you will advise further investigation. So these investigations you should know: CBC, retic count, ESR, peripheral smear, LFT, KFT. If iron deficiency, you are suspecting that the patient is having around 10-year-old child and with history of pica, and history of fatigue is there. So you will advise iron profile. Please mute yourself. Uh, who is that? Manya Gupta, please mute yourself. Manya Gupta, she's there. Someone please leave her a message to mute herself. Okay, so this is how we go on to, and these are the blood parameters which you should be aware of, like RBC count, HB concentration. You should know these normal ranges also. Red cell volume, like that is also known as the hematocrit, MCV, MCH, MCHC, and hematocrit. So these are various parameters which you should be aware of. So hemoglobin concentration in men is around 13 to 17, and in women it is 12 to 15. So this is about hematocrit. Red cell count is 4.3 to 5.9, and in women it is 3.5 to 5. Retic count, you should remember, this table has been taken from the Robbins. So as per this book, retic count normal range is 0.5 to 1.5, and MCV is 82 to 96, MCH is 27 to 33, and MCHC is 33 to 37. And red cell distribution where normal is 11.5 to 14.5. So on the basis of hemoglobin, we can grade anemia. This you should remember. So if hemoglobin is less than 7, it is severe anemia, moderate is 7 to 10, and mild is 10 to whatever is the lower limit of normal. For example, in females, it is lower limit is, if it is less than 12, it is anemia. For males, it is taken as 13. So what is hematocrit? Hematocrit is proportion of the excuse me. So hematocrit is proportion of the volume of RBCs relative to the volume of blood. So hematocrit is a very good indicator of anemia. MCV we have already discussed, and MCH is basically average amount of hemoglobin in each red cell. See, MCV was an average volume of all the RBCs, while MCH tells you about average amount of hemoglobin in each red cell, and it gives you values in picograms. So 27 to 33 is the average, and MCHC is the average concentration of hemoglobin. So MCHC will be reduced in iron deficiency anemias and thalassemias, while it will be raised in hereditary spherocytosis. See, red cell distribution width is another parameter which is very important, and by this parameter you can differentiate on the basis of peripheral smear. On the basis of this parameter, you can differentiate and you can predict whether the patient is having a beta thalassemia trait or iron deficiency anemia. Another investigation is peripheral smear examination. Here you can see that what is normocytic normochromic. We compare the size of the RBC with the nucleus of a small lymphocyte. So that is normocytic. If a cell which is larger than this nucleus of small lymphocyte, that will be macrocytic, and if the size is smaller, then that will be and chromia is normally the central pallor is up to 1/3 of RBC. That is normochromia. But if it increases central pallor, you can see that this in the center there is a pallor. If it increases more than 1/3 of RBC size, that is hypochromia. So the morphology categories of anemia are microcytic hypochromic. Here you can see this is the small lymphocyte, and this lymphocyte smaller in size. Here you can see that there is more than 1/3 hypochromia. Here you can see this is small lymphocyte, and these RBCs are bigger in size, that is macrocytic. And normocytic normochromic, you can see that this is the equal to the size of nucleus of small lymphocyte. Here again see this is the microcytic hypochromic, this is macrocytic. Here you can see this is hypersegmented neutrophil. So on the basis of morphology, you can also predict the shape of the RBCs. If you are finding sickle cell anemia, then you will investigate in that line. You will advise for HB electrophoresis or HPLC, or you will go for sickle cell solubility test and other tests also. Like in hereditary spherocytosis, you have the peripheral smear. If we are seeing these spherocytes, then we will think whether it is because of autoimmune hemolytic anemia or hereditary spherocytosis. Then we will advise the patient for Coombs test or other tests for confirmation of various particular diseases will be carried on. Thalassemias, you will see that there is microcytic hypochromic kind of anemia with many target cells. In the target cells, you can see there is this hemoglobin has come into center also. Normally, center pallor is empty, but here you will see a dot in the center also. That is target cells. Reticulocyte count is very, very important, and you have to remember that whenever you are for any hematological condition investigation, and so you should ask for reticulocyte count. Baseline retic count you should be there. You should have. So what is reticulocyte? It is the these are the immature RBCs. They have uh, still they have the RNA. So this high retic count indicates whether some hemolytic anemia is going on, or it can if you had someone has this iron deficiency anemia and you have started hematinic therapy. So as a response, retic count will increase. If you have started vitamin B12 folate therapy, as a response, this retic count will increase. So the basic approach to a diagnosis of anemia is So you will go for complete blood. There is low hemoglobin. Please mute yourself. So if there is complete blood count, if there is low hemoglobin, then you will look for whether it's problem in the red cell series or in the WBC or platelet. If there is problem in the red cell series, you will look at the retic count. If retic count is raised, it means it can be because it can be seen in if there is blood loss or in hemolytic anemia, then you will investigate in that line. If retic count is low, then you will think whether there is microcytic anemia, macrocytic or normocytic anemia. Then on the basis of MCV, if MCV is less than 80 femtoliters, and peripheral smear is also telling that it can be iron deficiency or it can be thalassemia, you will go for serum iron studies. If serum ferritin is low, you will diagnose it as iron deficiency anemia. If it is normal or high, you will look for hemoglobin electrophoresis. If that is abnormal study, you will report that way, or if it is normal, then it can be because of anemia of chronic disease or sideroblastic anemia. And if the MCV is more than 100 femtoliters, macrocytic anemia is there, then you will again look at retic count. Retic count, if it is increased, it means some kind of hemolysis is going on, or there might be some kind of blood loss. But if retic count is low, MCV is also more means there is ineffective erythropoiesis. Patient might have this megaloblastic anemia also. So you will ask for history of liver disease, some drugs or hypothyroidism. If it is there, is macrocytic anemia is because of those conditions. But if you have ruled bone marrow examination, see now it's not in normal vitamin B12 folate deficiency. So we go for the serum study, serum levels of these. And similar way, you can evaluate the hemolytic anemias. And if you are suspecting iron deficiency anemia and you are seeing that there is low HB, low packed cell volume, low MCV, MCH, MCHC, and peripheral smear is showing microcytic hypochromic anemia, RDW is raised, then you go for iron profile. In megaloblastic anemia, similarly, raised VMCH, and the patient will have pancytopenia. They will have low retic count. Then you will go for vitamin B12 and levels. And in anemia of chronic diseases, similarly, they have this normocytic, normochromic kind of morphology. In aplastic anemia, you might have normocytic, normochromic morphology or macrocytic morphology. So you will diagnose anemia on the basis of, you will take the complete details, including dietary habits, if the patient is having habits of pica, some medications they are taking, some chemicals they have been exposed to, or all the kind of history you will take, and then physical examination, you will check hepatosplenomegaly, skin pallor, heart murmurs are there, and then you will go for specific investigation. So the take-home message is, after initial history and examination, you will order some baseline investigation such as complete blood count, peripheral smear examination with retic count. If on the basis of these investigations you find the patient is anemic, then proceed to find out type of anemia, whether it is normocytic or microcytic, hypochromic or macrocytic, which you will come to know about from the peripheral smear report. If the patient is microcytic hypochromic with low retic count, low RBC count and low red cell indices, which are indicating iron deficiency anemia, then you will advise serum iron studies. And if you see that it is microcytic hypochromic with high retic count, and those also thalassemic conditions or some hemoglobinopathies, then you will advise electrophoresis of HPLC. And if the peripheral smear is showing spherocytes or sickle cells, bite cells, or other clues of hemolysis are present, then you will go for spatial test of the particular disease. Microcytic with low initial retic count you will suspect nutritional deficiency and advise vitamin B12 folate levels. So basically, it is very important to keep a track of reticulocyte levels. You will know whether it is increasing or not increasing. And if normocytic normochromic anemia is there with very low retic count and high ESR, you should search for the cause of anemia of chronic. Thank you so much. Is there any queries? Any queries? Any queries, guys? Anyone is listening?
No, ma'am. Not me.
गौरव was it all right? बीच में कोई disturbances तो नहीं थे?
No, ma'am. It's fine.
ठीक है. कोई queries है किसी को? कोई problems है तो you can ask.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Now, thank you.